Ever wonder why some men run from commitment while others suddenly decide they're all in? That mysterious switch that turns a hesitant maybe into a definite yes isn't random, it's psychology. You've been there. The endless waiting, the mixed signals, the uncertainty that hangs in the air when you're ready for the next step, but he seems stuck in neutral. You've tried everything, being extra caring, dropping hints, having the talk, yet nothing seems to push that commitment needle forward. The truth? Most women are approaching this completely backward. They're focused on strategies that actually push men further away from commitment. Today, I'm going to reveal the counterintuitive trigger that makes men suddenly see you as the woman they can't risk losing. This isn't about manipulation or games. It's about understanding how the male mind processes the decision to commit. What you learn works because it taps into deep psychological principles that govern how we form attachments and make significant life decisions. The insight I'm about to share has helped thousands of women transform lukewarm relationships into rock-solid commitments. The answer isn't what you expect, and that's exactly why it works when everything else has failed. Commitment isn't a simple yes or no decision for men. It's a complex psychological equation with multiple variables at play simultaneously. When a man hesitates to commit, it rarely has anything to do with how he feels about you in the moment. Instead, it's about how he projects those feelings into an uncertain future. Many women believe commitment comes from proving their worth through constant availability, emotional support, and domestic skills. They cook elaborate meals, respond instantly to texts, and make themselves endlessly available. Yet despite these efforts, commitment remains elusive. This creates a frustrating puzzle where more effort seems to yield less result. This happens because conventional wisdom about male commitment is fundamentally flawed. Men don't commit based on convenience or comfort alone. If that were true, they'd commit to anyone who makes their life easier, but we all know that's not how it works. Another misconception is that men need to be trapped or tricked into commitment. This harmful idea suggests using ultimatums, jealousy tactics, or emotional manipulation. These approaches might create temporary movement, but never lead to genuine, lasting commitment. What truly drives commitment is something far more primal and powerful. It connects directly to how men are wired to respond to certain relationship dynamics. This psychological trigger activates when specific conditions are present in a relationship. When activated, this trigger transforms a man's perception. Suddenly, committing doesn't feel like losing freedom. It feels like gaining something irreplaceable. The relationship shifts from optional to essential in his mind. This commitment trigger relates to a phenomenon psychologists call perceived irreplaceability. It occurs when a man recognizes qualities in you and in your relationship that he believes he cannot find elsewhere. But achieving this isn't about becoming perfect or flawless. Ironically, the path to creating irreplaceability often involves steps that seem counterintuitive. It requires creating space rather than closeness. It demands prioritizing yourself rather than prioritizing him. And it involves an authentic confidence that can't be faked. This psychological trigger works because it aligns with how men naturally process their emotional attachments and how they make major life decisions. Traditional relationship advice often suggests strategies that actively work against creating commitment. One classic approach tells women to be endlessly accommodating, always available, always agreeable, always putting his needs first. This creates the opposite of desire. Men value what they earn, not what's freely given without conditions. When everything is available without effort, it loses perceived value regardless of its actual worth. Another common strategy involves increasing pressure through serious talks about the relationship's future. These conversations typically happen when women feel insecure about the relationship's progress. Unfortunately, these discussions often trigger a man's instinctive resistance to external pressure. What feels like clarity seeking to you registers as demand making to him, activating his psychological reactance. The instinct to protect freedom when it feels threatened. Some women try to accelerate commitment by integrating completely into a man's life, adapting to his schedule, adopting his interests, and befriending all his social connections. This approach eliminates the healthy tension that creates attraction. When you become an extension of him rather than an independent force in his life, the dynamic that creates desire disappears. Many also believe showcasing domestic capabilities will convince a man of their value as a long-term partner. While partnership skills matter, they're secondary to the emotional and psychological dynamics that drive commitment decisions. A man doesn't commit because someone cooks well or keeps an organized home. He commits because he can't imagine life without a specific person. These approaches fail because they misunderstand what truly motivates commitment. Commitment isn't primarily a logical decision based on benefits and conveniences. It's an emotional decision driven by fear of loss, desire for something unique, and the perception of irreplaceable value. Effective approaches work with male psychology rather than against it. Instead of pursuing, they create space. Instead of demanding, they inspire. Instead of demonstrating value through service, they embody value through self-worth and boundaries. What actually works involves a counterintuitive shift in focus. Rather than making him the center of attention, it requires becoming centered in yourself. This creates the psychological conditions where commitment feels like gaining something extraordinary rather than giving up freedom. Healthy independence forms the foundation of genuine attraction and commitment. This doesn't mean acting distant or uninterested. It means maintaining a full, rich life that exists independently of your relationship status. When you continue pursuing personal passions, maintaining close friendships, advancing career goals, and exploring individual interests, something powerful happens in the relationship dynamic. Men are naturally drawn to women who don't need them but choose them anyway. This creates an entirely different energy than relationships, where emotional dependence is the primary binding force. Independence signals confidence, emotional stability, and self-sufficiency, all highly attractive qualities that stand in stark contrast to neediness or insecurity. Independence creates natural attraction through the principle of self-validation. When you derive your sense of worth and happiness from multiple sources rather than exclusively from his attention or approval, you become magnetically attractive. This happens because self-validated individuals bring positive energy to relationships rather than constantly drawing energy from them. This independence also creates healthy space within the relationship, room to breathe, to miss each other, to appreciate each other's company when together. Without this space, relationships often become suffocating, leading men to associate commitment with loss of self rather than gain of partnership. Men instinctively seek partners, not dependents. A partner enhances his life while a dependent drains his resources, emotional, mental, and otherwise. When you maintain healthy independence, you signal that you're an equal who brings value rather than someone seeking to extract value or validation. This distinction profoundly impacts how men perceive commitment. Committing to a dependent feels like taking on responsibility and limitation. Committing to an independent partner feels like gaining a valuable alliance that makes life better, richer, and more fulfilling. Independence also creates a healthy fear of loss. When he recognizes you have options, confidence, and a fulfilling life with or without him, he naturally works harder to secure his place in your world. This isn't manipulation, it's human nature to value what we might lose over what we already securely possess. Cultivating healthy independence might seem counterintuitive when seeking deeper connection, but it creates the psychological conditions where genuine commitment can flourish. It transforms the commitment question from "why should I" to "how could I not?" Personal boundaries are the invisible lines that define where you end and others begin. Strong boundaries in relationships aren't about building walls. They're about establishing clear standards for how you deserve to be treated. This includes what behaviors you will and won't accept, how you allow others to speak to you, and what access others have to your time, energy, and resources. Strong boundaries look like calmly declining last-minute plans when they conflict with previously scheduled activities. They appear as gracefully ending conversations that become disrespectful rather than engaging in arguments. Boundaries show up as maintaining personal rituals and routines even when in a relationship. They manifest as communicating directly about needs rather than hoping someone will magically understand unexpressed expectations. Boundaries create respect through a fascinating psychological mechanism. When we clearly define and consistently maintain our boundaries, we demonstrate self-respect. This self-respect becomes the template that shows others exactly how to treat us. Men instinctively respect women who respect themselves enough to establish and maintain clear boundaries. This respect develops because boundaries communicate value. Things without boundaries are perceived as common, easily accessible, and therefore less valuable. When something has clear boundaries, access becomes a privilege rather than a right. This principle applies to physical spaces, emotional availability, and personal time alike. Respect forms the essential foundation of healthy commitment. Without respect, commitment becomes a power imbalance rather than a partnership. Men commit deeply when they respect a woman's mind, values, independence, and boundaries. This respect creates admiration, and admiration fuels the desire for lasting connection. Boundaries also create security in relationships. When a man knows exactly where he stands with you, what behaviors will and won't be accepted, and that you communicate honestly rather than accommodating at your own expense, he feels safe to invest emotionally. This security is paramount for commitment because men avoid committing when they sense instability or unpredictability in relationship expectations. Boundaries demonstrate emotional maturity, another crucial factor in commitment decisions. They show you can manage your emotions, communicate effectively, and prioritize relationship health over momentary comfort. This maturity signals readiness for partnership rather than codependency. Men commit to women they respect because respect creates a desire to protect the relationship. When he deeply respects you, maintaining and building your relationship becomes a priority rather than an obligation. Scarcity profoundly influences human psychology and decision making. When something appears limited or potentially unavailable, its perceived value instantly increases. This applies to luxury goods, limited edition products, rare opportunities, and especially relationships. Our brains are wired to want what isn't easily obtainable and to place higher value on what feels exclusive rather than readily available. This psychological principle explains why people stand in line for hours to purchase items they wouldn't otherwise want, why limited time offers drive sales, and why auction prices rise dramatically when multiple bidders compete. Scarcity triggers a fear of missing out that overrides rational assessment of actual value. In relationships, perceived scarcity operates just as powerfully. When a woman's time, attention, and presence feel unlimited and guaranteed, regardless of a man's behavior or investment level, their perceived value naturally diminishes. This isn't because they're actually less valuable, it's simply how human psychology works. Men particularly value what they feel they might lose. This isn't manipulation, it's basic psychology. When a woman maintains healthy independence, continues pursuing personal goals, and demonstrates she won't accept less than she deserves, she activates this scarcity principle naturally. Her time and presence become valuable precisely because they're not guaranteed without reciprocal investment. This creates healthy tension in the relationship, not anxiety or game playing, but the natural tension that comes from valuing something and wanting to secure its place in your life. This tension motivates action, appreciation, and decision making. Commitment readiness triggers when a man recognizes two things simultaneously: the unique value you bring to his life and the realistic possibility of losing that value if he doesn't commit. This recognition creates an internal shift where commitment starts feeling like a gain rather than a loss of freedom. Genuine scarcity comes from authentic high standards and self-worth, not artificial unavailability or manipulation. It manifests when you fill your life with meaningful activities, maintain important relationships beyond your romantic partnership, pursue passionate interests, and uphold clear boundaries about acceptable treatment. When men sense they must rise to certain standards to maintain their place in your life, not through ultimatums, but through your consistent self-respect, commitment becomes a natural next step. The fear of losing someone truly special becomes greater than the fear of commitment itself, shifting the internal equation that governs decision-making. Emotional intelligence in relationships encompasses several crucial skills. Accurately identifying emotions in yourself and others, understanding the causes and effects of different emotional states, managing emotional reactions, even during conflict, and responding appropriately to a partner's emotional needs without taking responsibility for their feelings. This intelligence manifests as validating feelings without necessarily agreeing with actions, communicating needs clearly without blame or criticism, setting boundaries with compassion rather than anger. and recognizing emotional patterns that might be triggering conflicts. Women who demonstrate high emotional intelligence respond rather than react, seek understanding before solutions, and create space for emotions without becoming overwhelmed by them. Emotional intelligence creates deeper connection because it builds psychological safety. When a man experiences being understood rather than judged, supported rather than criticized, and respected rather than controlled, he naturally opens up more fully. This opening creates vulnerability, which forms the foundation of genuine intimacy. Emotionally intelligent communication cuts through defenses that typically prevent men from fully engaging. Instead of feeling attacked or misunderstood, which triggers defensive responses, men feel seen and accepted. This acceptance doesn't mean tolerating poor behavior. Rather, it means addressing issues from a place of understanding instead of accusation. Connection deepens because emotional intelligence allows for complexity in relationships. It creates room for both partners to express contradictory feelings, work through difficult emotions, and navigate conflicts without catastrophizing. This emotional resilience transforms potential breaking points into strengthening opportunities. For men specifically, emotional intelligence makes commitment feel safe rather than threatening. Many men avoid commitment not because they fear connection itself, but because they fear being trapped in a relationship where they'll be constantly criticized, misunderstood, or emotionally manipulated. When a woman demonstrates emotional intelligence, she signals that the relationship will be a space of understanding rather than judgment, growth rather than stagnation, and partnership rather than power struggles. This creates safety for vulnerability, essential for lasting commitment. Emotional intelligence also helps navigate differences without escalation. Men commit more readily when they see evidence that disagreements can be handled maturely without spiraling into relationship-threatening conflicts. This capability creates confidence that the relationship can weather inevitable challenges. Perhaps most importantly, emotional intelligence allows men to feel both accepted and challenged simultaneously. This balance, being loved for who they are while being inspired to grow, creates the ideal psychological conditions where commitment feels like an opportunity for expansion rather than limitation. Routine gradually erodes attraction in relationships through a neurological process called habituation. Our brains are wired to pay attention to new stimuli while filtering out familiar patterns. When relationships become entirely predictable, same conversations, same activities, same responses, the brain begins registering this predictability as background noise rather than something deserving focused attention and interest. This habituation effect explains why initial attraction often feels so intense. Everything is new, surprising, and unknown, keeping both people mentally and emotionally engaged. As predictability increases, dopamine production naturally decreases. Since dopamine drives motivation, pursuit, and pleasure, its reduction directly impacts feelings of excitement and attraction. Complete predictability creates comfort, but simultaneously reduces the emotional arousal necessary for romantic attraction. Partners begin feeling more like roommates than lovers when every aspect of interaction becomes routine. This shift happens gradually rather than suddenly, making it particularly dangerous to relationship vitality. Moderate unpredictability counteracts this neurological habituation by reactivating the brain's reward and anticipation circuits. Small elements of surprise or novelty, an unexpected perspective during conversation, a spontaneous activity, or an evolving personal interest create renewed attention and engagement. This doesn't require grand gestures or complete personality changes. Subtle variations in familiar patterns are often most effective. Unpredictability works because it triggers curiosity. When a partner exhibits depth beyond what's already known, it creates a desire to discover more. This curiosity generates the same neurochemical cocktail present during initial attraction phases, dopamine, norepinephrine, and adrenaline, recreating feelings of excitement and interest. Men are particularly drawn to women who maintain an element of pleasant unpredictability. This creates a fascinating paradox in male psychology: simultaneous desires for both security and discovery. While men seek reliability and consistency in core values and emotional responses, they remain attracted to partners who continue revealing new layers of personality, thought, and passion. This connects directly to a man's fundamental desire to fully know his partner while recognizing he never completely can. This tension between knowing and discovering creates perpetual interest. When a woman continues evolving, developing new interests, and sharing fresh perspectives, she creates an internal landscape that can never be fully mapped, always offering new territory to explore. This ongoing discovery process transforms commitment from an endpoint into a journey. Rather than committing to a known entity, men commit to the exciting process of continual discovery within a secure relationship foundation. Men respond instinctively to direct, straightforward communication that respects their intelligence without micromanaging their responses. Effective communication with men focuses on clarity over quantity, emotional honesty without emotional flooding, and expressing needs rather than criticizing character. This approach acknowledges fundamental differences in communication preferences while creating bridges rather than barriers. Communication that resonates with men tends to be solution-oriented rather than problem-focused. Stating clear needs, desires, or observations without extensive processing of every emotional nuance creates engagement rather than overwhelm. Men typically process information linearly and appreciate communication that follows this pattern: main point first, followed by supporting details as needed. Tone significantly impacts how men receive communication. Even difficult topics can be discussed productively when approached with respect rather than contempt, curiosity rather than criticism, and partnership rather than accusation. Speaking with calm confidence creates safety for honest exchange, while emotional intensity often triggers defensive responses that shut down meaningful dialogue. A critical distinction exists between demands and expressions. Demands create pressure through implied threats, ultimatums, or manipulation. They sound like, "if you really loved me, you would," or "you never," or "you always." These approaches trigger resistance because they threaten autonomy and attack character rather than addressing specific behaviors or needs. Expressions, conversely, center on personal feelings and desires without assigning blame. They sound like, "I feel valued when," or I would love if we could, or it's important to me that. This approach owns personal feelings while inviting rather than demanding response. Expressions create space for voluntary giving rather than compliance, fundamentally changing how men perceive requests. This communication style creates psychological safety, an environment where vulnerability feels rewarded rather than exploited. Men commit more readily when they experience a relationship as a space where they can express thoughts, feelings, and concerns without facing judgment, criticism, or emotional penalties. Safe communication demonstrates that conflict resolution is possible without relationship destruction. When men see evidence that disagreements lead to greater understanding rather than escalating tension, commitment becomes less risky. This safety comes from consistent patterns of respectful communication, even during difficult conversations. Communication that acknowledges and appreciates positive efforts rather than exclusively focusing on shortcomings also creates commitment safety. Men, like everyone, flourish with recognition and wither under constant criticism. Relationships where contributions are noticed and valued naturally inspire greater investment and commitment. Everything we've discussed reveals a powerful truth. Commitment isn't something you extract through pressure or persuasion. It's something men eagerly offer when the right psychological conditions exist. This insight changes everything about how relationships develop and deepen. The path to commitment isn't about becoming someone different or playing manipulation games. It's about embodying authentic confidence, maintaining healthy independence, establishing clear boundaries, and communicating with respect and clarity. These elements create the perfect environment where commitment feels like freedom rather than confinement. What makes this approach so effective is that it works with male psychology rather than against it. By understanding how men process decisions about commitment, you align your actions with their natural inclinations rather than fighting against them. This creates harmony instead of resistance. The beautiful paradox is that focusing on becoming your best self actually creates the conditions that naturally inspire commitment from quality partners. When you value yourself enough to maintain independence, boundaries, and standards, others naturally value you more as well. If this video helped you understand commitment in a new way, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. We share insights like these every week to help you create the relationship you truly deserve.